Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. Today, we're going to be talking about making mistakes and fumbling and when things get messy and when sometimes we maybe completely fall on our face and fail in front of others. And we're going to talk about what this looks like, what happens, what our primary emotion typically is with this, what some of our primary default behaviors are with this. And then we're going to talk about what you can do to start to work your way through moments of failure or moments of messiness or moments of mistake making in public ways in a way that actually allows you to advance your leadership in the process. So while this doesn't feel easy and it's not desirable necessarily to have fumbly mistakes or to have failures in front of others, it can be a really powerful way to remember your values, tap into those values, make decisions based on your values, and at the end of the whole thing, actually be in a stronger position to build trust and credibility and authority than you were before, which sounds a little counterintuitive, but follow me, hear me out. I think you'll see where we're going with this. And I think this will really help some of you who feel so either worried about failure in front of others or feel like it's just not allowed and that we can't do that and that every time you fail, you have to try to cover it in some way or that you can't be more transparent in being imperfect, which I know for many women can be a big struggle. So let's dive right in. I want to say that the reason we're talking about this today is because this is something that's come up recently in a handful of client calls and client coaching calls, but it's also something that's come up over the years as I've been in the coaching space, and it's something that I've had to figure out on my own. Building businesses over the course of a number of years, building businesses that require a public-facing persona, a public-facing, having a public image. There's definitely been times where I've messed things up, where I've made mistakes or where I've made decisions that other people didn't approve of. And, they called me to task in front of other people. And I've had to deal with this multiple times. And it's never easy. It's never fun, but it's gotten so much better over time because I have clarity around how I can make things better, even if I don't make the best choices in the moment. Of course, I always want to make the best choices in the moment as someone who really wants to make other people feel good and really wants to get things right. It's really important for me to get things right. It's really important for me to be seen as a person who's good and who has good intentions and does things to have good impact. But as much as I try to be all those things, do all those things, there's definitely it's human nature, right? To be messy sometimes, to be imperfect, to fail. And so I've had to learn how to navigate this publicly in different ways, on different levels, in different scenarios and situations, sometimes in one-on-one situations, sometimes in group situations, sometimes on the internet, all sorts of different scenarios. So I've had some experience with it. And when I have clients come up against this, it's always a really productive conversation. And what I find in those one-on-one coaching sessions is that people usually come to me feeling really down and they come to me like, I don't know what to do, or I can't do anything. And they come sometimes feeling even almost frozen, like they don't know where to go from here. And in talking things through, they always feel better and lighter and more positive and optimistic, like life can go on after a mistake, because it absolutely can. And at the end of the day, you always get to choose your narrative and you always get to write the ending to your own stories. And so my purpose in talking about this with my clients in one-on-one situations is always to give my clients back a sense of power that they feel like maybe they've lost because of something that's happened. And so that's my purpose with you all today as well, is that you can walk through a situation and you can feel like, wow, that didn't go how I thought. That's not how I wanted to show up. That's not at all what I expected. I completely failed in front of everyone. And I still have a sense of power. I still can do better moving forward. And this doesn't have to be the thing that defines me. And the situation doesn't have to be correlated with my worth or my value as a person, as a leader, as a woman, etc. So when things go wrong, when there's some sort of mistake, when we make a public fumble or there's a public failure that takes place in whether it's in a, medium, large scale situation, a small scale situation, it might be at work with your team. It might be with just a couple people. It might be on the internet. It can be, maybe it's in front of the whole company. I mean, this can be on such a wide spectrum in terms of scale. When this happens, the primary emotion that we feel is shame. And sometimes we can recognize that right away as shame, but other times we might notice like we feel angry, or we might feel like I feel sad or frustrated. Usually under that, though, is a feeling of shame. So that's not to say that shame is like the only feeling that you're going to experience, but usually shame is in there, and usually shame is pretty dominant, even if it feels like something different. Because if you have, what I've found personally is if you are someone who holds a lot of shame, that sometimes shame feels like defensiveness, or it feels like a sense of injustice, or a sense of wanting to either deny or deflect. And so thinking through like, okay, what does shame feel like in my body? Because it might not feel like what you think it does. It might not feel like some of the stereotypical feelings around shame. So just kind of think through, when you make a mistake, what do you feel in your body? And then what is that actual feeling? So does it feel so uncomfortable that it makes you feel angry? But is that this because the shame is so uncomfortable? So the primary emotion that people typically experience when they fail publicly is shame. Now, they might not be able to label that emotion, but that's often what that primary emotion is. And there's one of two things that tends to happen. I find in my female clients, there's a lot of hiding. So I feel I make the mistake in front of other people, I feel shame, and then I go hide. Or the counterpoint to that is that instead of hiding, deny or deflect or get defensive. So the mistake happens, I feel the shame, and then I get defensive. I deflect, like try to put the spotlight on something or someone else. I deny it didn't even happen. I totally denied the whole thing. I had no part in it. Or I just get really defensive in terms of like how I'm interacting with people around the situation and what I'm willing to own or take accountability for. And there's just a general defensiveness around my attitude. So thinking through now, when you're in a situation, when you've been in situations in the past where maybe things have fallen apart and you felt like, this wasn't a moment that you wanted to be in. What were you feeling? And then what was your response after that? What did you do? Did you hide? Did you deny? Did you deflect? Were you super defensive? While no one wants to have their imperfections and their fumbles on a public stage, the lessons that we can learn from these moments can be so incredibly valuable in terms of opportunities for growth. And now I get it, like, no one in the middle of making a big mistake in front of other people is like, oh, yay, I get to grow now. No, like no one thinks that. But people that become great leaders are people who have had to navigate these kinds of things, and they've figured it out, and they've taken responsibility for figuring it out. And they've taken responsibility for trying to fix it afterwards. Like that's how you become a better leader. So as much as it sucks to be in these kinds of situations, there's value in being in them because of the way that they can inform your leadership moving forward. So with all that said, yes, your public failures can absolutely make you a better leader. The other thing that's really important to remember is that when people make mistakes and they take accountability, it actually builds trust with people. And this is where this gets missed so much. Fun fact, people don't trust leaders who seem perfect, who never admit to making mistakes, who can never take responsibility or accountability for getting it wrong. That is not trustworthy behavior. Trustworthy behavior is being a full scope human being. And a full scope human being makes mistakes. And a full scope human being doesn't know everything and doesn't always get it right. And so people trust leaders who can make a mistake and then own that mistake. Mistakes are a demonstration of humanity, a demonstration of authenticity, a demonstration of vulnerability. So when we see people making mistakes and then owning it and trying to fix it and do better next time, that creates an opportunity for us to build trust in them. And it also helps us see those people as human, as fallible, and as real. And we want to follow leaders who are real, right? When you think about the people that you admire most, it's probably the ones who are the most real seeming that you most want to emulate, that you're most attracted to, that you want to build relationships with, that you want to you want to be more like, that you feel a sense of connection to. So we trust people who aren't afraid to take accountability. We trust people who don't shy away from saying that they're sorry. So this doesn't mean like go and make mistakes on purpose so you can just be apologizing all the time. But trust and accountability really, or trust and credibility really are built in how you manage messes and how you take accountability. So thinking through, when you make a mistake, how do you take responsibility? How do you apologize? How do you demonstrate an understanding of what you've learned? How do you commit to taking steps in the future to ensure that you'll do better next time around? These are really, really important pieces of making a mistake, working your way through it, and being stronger and better on the other side. Because you can certainly make mistakes in a million different ways publicly and absolutely erode trust, destroy trust, and lose a ton of trust and credibility. But you can absolutely make a mistake and then work through it in a way that allows you to build trust and credibility on the back end. So when I'm talking about some of these steps, and we're going to dig into them in just a minute here, but when we're talking about these actual steps that you can take in terms of taking responsibility, apologizing where you need to, really demonstrating what you've learned, and then committing to doing better next time, these are steps and principles taken from restorative justice practices. And so when we're looking at restorative justice practices, we're really looking at, how can I admit that I made a mistake, admit that I did harm, figure out what I need to learn in this situation so that I can do better next time, and then take responsibility for that learning experience so that I'm not putting myself in the center. I'm centering the person who I harmed. I'm figuring out what I need to figure out. I'm taking responsibility for my own learning. I'm not counting on the person I harmed to educate me in any way. I'm taking responsibility to learn better and to do differently next time. So this is all restorative justice kind of work, but this is applicable in situations that don't necessarily involve a restorative justice moment. It doesn't necessarily involve a moment where there's been an injustice. This can be any kind of mistake. These principles, these action steps can still absolutely apply and give us those opportunities to model humility, integrity, strength, grace, and a healthy sense of ego versus that defensive, denying, deflective, unhealthy sense of ego, which is where we erode trust, right? So demonstrating a healthy sense of ego, humility, grace, integrity, that's the healthy sense of ego that allows us to build the trust and credibility versus the unhealthy sense of ego, which would be the deny, deflect, and get defensive. So when you model the humility, integrity, grace, strength through that process, people will trust you more. People will see you as more credible, more authentic. People will feel more connected to you as you navigate the situation together. So at the end of the day, the kinds of leaders that people remember, that people emulate, that people want to model their own leadership after is not leaders who are perfect. People don't want leaders to be perfect. They want leaders to be real. So being a great leader is far more about being real than it is about being perfect. So how can you be real in these moments in a really conscientious way? So let's talk about these steps and break them down a little bit more in terms of the steps that you can take when you've had this public moment. And some of these steps will apply in all situations and some of them won't. And sometimes we make mistakes and we don't have an apology necessarily to make because we maybe haven't caused harm, but we still need to own the mistake. We still need to own that we did, that something went wrong. So apply what applies to your situation if you're using these steps. So the first thing, taking responsibility for your part in the mess. So let's look at, how can I take responsibility for what is mine to own here? So first of all, how did my intentions diverge from the impact? So something happened. I intended a certain thing to happen. So whenever we go into a situation, we intend one thing, and then at a certain point we can see sometimes what I intended to have happen here is not happening. The impact of what my behavior, my actions is totally different than I thought it was going to be. So how can we see where intentions and impact diverge and then own what we need to own? That, I intended this thing. Now I can see the impact was something very different. I need to own my part in that. I need to own that, the thing, maybe the steps I took toward that intention were not the right steps. Maybe they weren't the right steps right now. Maybe they were just not good choices. Maybe I didn't see other options, but I need to take responsibility for the action steps that I took with those intentions that did not lead to the impact I was hoping to have. So how can you explicitly take accountability and responsibility for the impact that you had that was not the intended impact? And then looking at what is yours to own and what is not. So there's definitely situations and scenarios, especially in the workplace, where there's parts of this situation, this public failure, that are yours to own. And then there's parts that are not yours to own. And one of the things that comes up a lot is when I'm talking with clients and in scenarios that I've been in as well, is that if there are multiple players in the situation, it's not all yours to own. And over-owning responsibility and taking accountability for every single thing, that's not great leadership. So really teasing out, here's my thing to own. And you don't need to worry about what other people need to own. This is not like about you pointing fingers and being like, I'm owning this, so you need to own that. It's not that, but it's recognizing like, here's what I did. Here's what I'm taking responsibility for, and leaving it at that. And if other people choose to take responsibility for their part, that's on them. But recognizing that your responsibility is within a certain realm and really owning that. And then giving yourself the grace to recognize what's not yours to own. You don't need to own other people's reactions. You don't need to own other people's feelings about things. Those are things you can't control. So you can own certain things, but you don't need to own everything. Now, if someone's reaction was that they felt deeply hurt and harmed, then you can own the behavior that you demonstrated that got you there. But if someone's decided that they're going to continually shame you for the mistake that you made for the next 6 months, you don't need to own what they have decided to do. You don't need to keep owning things that like, this is now their own situation that they're choosing to behave in a certain way, and that's not yours to own. And then letting people know, as you're taking responsibility, letting people know who you are and who you are not. And so recognizing and saying things like, hey, it's important for me to take responsibility here. It's important to me to learn through this experience. It's important to me to uphold my values of XYZ, maybe uphold my values of transparency or accountability or vulnerability. I'm not trying to hide from this. So really explicitly saying, I'm not trying to hide from this. I'm not trying to deny this. I'm not trying to put the spotlight on someone else. I'm here to own this. So really exemplifying what your values are through this process so that people understand that this is important to you to show up in a certain way, and you're demonstrating that in terms of what you're saying and how you're carrying yourself. Second step is, do you need to apologize for harm done? So who was harmed in the situation? What was the fallout? Are there people that you need to apologize to? Are there, is there collateral damage that is maybe not even direct harm, but indirect harm that you want to say like, hey, I recognize that the impact was these, 3 ripples or these handful of people, or maybe multiple layers of people that were inconvenienced or that were harmed or that were impacted in some way. And then how can you center their experience as a demonstration of empathy to say, I recognize that these people suffered or this person suffered in this situation, and that is not okay with me. And I want to apologize for that. So a demonstration of empathy, also a demonstration of emotional intelligence, that you're recognizing that, hey, like I'm having an experience over here and I'm seeing that someone else is having an experience over here, over there, based on what I did. And I can see the impact of that. And I have the emotional intelligence to identify that. And so it's important for me to now make an apology based on what I know in terms of how other people are receiving the situation. The third step that you can take is demonstrating an understanding of what you learned or are learning in this process. So explicitly saying like, hey, in this process, I learned XYZ. What are the things that you learned? And how you're growing through this. I learned these things, and I'm recognizing that I have some room to grow in these certain areas, and I'm taking myself to task on this. I'm researching this. I'm talking to experts on this. I'm in conversations with so-and-so. I'm talking to my therapist. I'm talking to my colleagues. I'm talking to my own boss or supervisor. I'm talking to mentors. I'm talking to my coach about it. So demonstrating that you are in the process, either that what you've learned or that what you're in the process of learning in this situation, because you understand that you want to grow from this and that you are committed to that growth. And then identifying what you see differently. So, hey, going into this, I thought this thing, and now I can see from what happened, this very different perspective. I've learned this, and now I understand, oh gosh, that was not the right step. That was not the way to go about this. So what do you see differently? Sharing that shift in your perspective can also show your capacity as a leader to see, like my point of view can change over time based on things that are happening right in front of my face. And that's an important piece of this, but it's also an important part of leadership as well. And then that fourth step is committing to the steps that you'll take to ensure that you'll do better next time. So identifying like, this is what I'm going to do differently next time. Identifying, here's what I've learned and here's how I'm putting it into action. Here's the steps that I'm taking. Here's what I'm going to do in this scenario. When we have the same meeting next month, or we have the same experience, event in next quarter, or whatever the situation is, so that people really know, like, okay, here's the things that you've learned. Here's the way you're going to behave differently next time, and that you're really making a commitment, a public commitment, and taking responsibility for like what's going to look different next time. And then also saying how you're going to keep yourself accountable. So I've done this in the past, like, hey, I'm learning a lot about this right now. I made this mistake. This is totally not what I expected to have happen. I see where I caused harm. I want to apologize to these certain people. Here's what I'm learning right now. And I'm really committed to continuing to learn. And here's the ways that I'm continuing to learn. Here's the steps that I'm taking. And here's how I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to, keep checking in with this person. I'm going to take this class. I'm going to get this certification. I'm going to, whatever the thing is, to like show my commitment to continued growth. So that's what you can do in the moment when you're really in it. The next piece is letting go of the shame. So what are the steps that you can take to let go of the shame? Because even in taking these steps, sometimes we still feel like, oh, this just feels so yucky and icky, and I don't want to keep thinking about this. It feels sometimes like these failures or these mistakes stick with us and we can't get over them, or we can't recover. Even if we've done the steps, it feels like we're just carrying them so close to our heart, especially if we're a really heart-centered leader. If we've caused harm in some way, it can just feel unbearable to try to move past it because we are so concerned about the harm that we potentially caused, or other people's view of us, or how there might continue to be collateral damage or negative impact. So how can we start to let go of the shame? So first of all, trusting that the right people will see your growth and leadership evolution, because there absolutely could be people that will judge you and be like, well, I was giving that person a chance and now I'm not. They might not give you another chance. That's other people, that's up to other people. That's other people's prerogative, and you can't control that. So trusting that there will be the right people that will see, like, look at the steps that you took to make this better, to be committed to growth, to own your learning, to take responsibility. There are absolutely people that will see that, and trusting that the right people are going to see your commitment to growth and leadership evolution will go a really long way, because those are the people that you want in your corner anyway. You don't want the people who are like, I can never trust them again. Like, if that's the kind of person they are, if you are dealing with someone who believes that you should be infallible, you don't want them in your corner. It's not someone you probably want to continue building a relationship with. It's probably not someone that you can trust if they are committed to never trusting you again, right? Be okay with some people not following along or accepting your accountability or your apology. Be okay with some people writing you off. Now, I understand that can feel really uncomfortable. Sometimes these are people we maybe had a close relationship with. We cared about their opinion. We valued them in a certain way. They held a specific place in our lives that was maybe meaningful, maybe deeply meaningful to us. And they might not come along on this journey with us. They might not recover with us. And we have to be okay with accepting that that's about them, and you can't be responsible for that. You can only do what you can do. And I've definitely been in multiple situations where there's people who aren't ready to come along with me after the fact. And I have to be okay. And that's hurt. It's been really hard. It's taken a lot to process and get over. And at the end of the day, I can't make anyone do anything. And I also can't afford to give my energy to people who will not meet me halfway, because then I'm compromising the energy that I could be giving to other people. So that part's really important. If I'm so consumed by this one person or the small contingency of people who aren't willing to give a second chance, who can't accept an apology, who can't, see me doing my very best to be in high integrity, if that consumes me, everyone else who trusts me and believes in me and needs me starts to lose out, because my energy is being consumed by this one person or small contingency of people. And now the impact of that one mistake has this continued impact that can be extremely detrimental. So at a certain point, you have to be willing to accept that some people might not come along with you in this recovery. And you have to be okay with that, because you have to recognize that the people who continue to need me and the people who are willing to rebuild trust with me, those are the people who deserve my energy and that I want to rebuild with. And I owe it to them to show up with all my best energy and not reserve all my best energy for people who are committed to holding me in a bad light or who are committed to only seeing me as someone who can never recover from this. So again, understanding what you can control and what you can't control. Next is being really clear on your values and continuing to uphold them as proof to yourself and to others of who you are and how you are taking responsibility for who you are becoming. There's a specific situation I was in a number of years ago now, and I was really being taken to task in terms of my values. And like, Sarah says she stands for this, and how could she possibly stand for this because she did this one thing? And I had to, at a certain point, recognize that I'm very committed to my values. I always have been. I always will be. And I will continue to uphold them no matter what other people are saying about me, because that's just who I am. And that if there are people looking to discredit me and my values and how I uphold them, I have to let them like have their own song and dance and pony show for as long as they want, because I know that I am so consistent in upholding my values in so many ways that, again, the right people are going to see me doing that, and that's all I can do. I am very aware of my values, how I uphold them. That doesn't mean that I don't mess them up sometimes. It doesn't mean that like things don't slip by where I'm like, oh gosh, I didn't think about how this behavior might impact this or might might undermine that value. That doesn't mean I'm perfect by any means. But if I'm consistently trying to uphold those values and demonstrating that in public ways and demonstrating that in my trusted relationships, that is going to shine through. I am very confident in that. And so when I know my values and I uphold them and I continue to use them as a lens for decision making, I continue to use them to prove to myself and to the people closest to me that like, this is who I am. This is me taking responsibility for whom I am becoming. And that's all we can do as human beings. Then that's me knowing that I've done enough. And then last is taking pride in modeling the kind of leadership you wish you saw more around you. We don't have a lot of great examples of people publicly failing, taking ownership, apologizing, telling us what they're learning, how they're going, how they're going to do better next time. We don't see that a lot around us. So you have the opportunity to be that person for someone else, to model to other people, especially emerging leaders, especially younger women, how that can be done so that more people can be getting through public failure in a really healthy way, instead of hiding from it, or instead of becoming defensive, or instead of becoming so riddled with shame that they don't go for the opportunities in their lives that they're very qualified for and doing the big things that we actually need more women emerging leaders to do. So thinking through how you can really take pride in modeling the kind of leadership you wish you saw around you, in terms of like, how do I wish I saw a leader make a mistake and recover from it? How do I want to model that to other people? Because nobody is perfect, yet we don't often see people modeling how to be imperfect, right? So thinking through how you can be that person for someone else. So if you are in a situation currently, or you can think about a situation maybe in recent history where you've made a mistake and you felt that shame, and maybe you've gone into hiding, or maybe you've gone into that place of being defensive, think through how you can use these steps right now, or how you could have used these steps in the past, and what can be different if you put these steps into action, and how can this become a part of who you are and who you are becoming in terms of being that really trusted, credible leader that leads with integrity, that leads with authenticity, that leads as an imperfect leader who is always willing to own when they made a mistake, and is always willing to learn and grow, and is always committed to doing better moving forward, because that's the leadership journey. Nobody has it all figured out. And anyone you think has it all figured out, I promise you they don't. I promise you I've seen enough in my 49 years and seen so many different kinds of leaders that nobody has it all figured out. And so how can you go ahead and embrace being that leader that doesn't have it all figured out, and that you're willing to publicly grow in front of other people, because that is actually going to be some of your leadership edge. So I hope this was helpful. Please share this episode with anyone who you know who might be in a situation where they're experiencing some sort of failure, some sort of fumble, maybe feeling that shame, maybe in hiding right now, or feeling defensive, or, you know, in that place of wanting to deny and deflect and just make it go away, because I know this can be really, really helpful to them as well. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to be back with you next week. And until then, remember that I'm in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit saradean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at saradean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at saradeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.